Tell me a little bit. Let's start just with your story and your background.
I grew up in the Hasidic community of Stamford Hill. This is in London and Hackney, where there's a large Jewish community. Often people know it as the ultra-Orthodox community or strictly Orthodox community. Hasidic is kind of one part of, I don't want to go into the details, maybe we can get back to it later, but it's basically a very insular community that likes to separate itself from wider British culture. And is very focused on their interpretation of Judaism, which is, by the way, an all-encompassing thing. So they live their religion 24/7. I grew up in that culture. As I said, very isolated from wider British society. We didn't speak English, spoke Yiddish growing up. And I left that community when I was 20 and then went to university. And I'm sure we can get into more of those details.
Okay. How is your English so good? When did you start speaking English?
So I had a tiny bit of English as a 5-year-old. I went to an English-speaking school for 2 years. I kind of forgot English because I was speaking from the age of 7 to 18. I was speaking only Yiddish. And then, I learned it. I mean, mainly from a dictionary, practicing with people and, but I think you can still pick up a bit of an accent, can't you?
I think it's more the syntax. But it's like a formal...
What do you mean by syntax?
There are formal word orders sometimes.
You think so?
Slightly formal, yeah. For a person who I can see as a fun person, but the syntax comes out slightly formal.
Well, maybe because I picked up English from reading more than from speaking.
That's what it is then.
Yeah. People often ask me where I'm from.
Okay.
Okay,
interesting. And are you happy on the outside?
Yeah, very happy. I believe in being part of the world. I think there's tremendous value, and we can get more into it. But I think there's tremendous value in these insular communities and the way they preserve certain traditions and ways of life. But for me, I want to be part of the world. Yeah.
Was it hard leaving?
Incredibly hard. Yeah.
Can you take me through a brief rundown?
Yeah. I mentioned the language barrier, but perhaps more importantly is the cultural barrier. I never spoke with women. I never spoke with anyone outside of my community. Didn't know any cultural references, didn't know ways of life. There's often, I also lost my family in the process. And I've since kind of managed to rebuild a bit of those relations. But at the time I was essentially homeless, got kicked out from home. I had to rebuild from scratch. It was like landing on a foreign shore without anything. Had no money, even clothes. Had to buy, kind of secular clothes, haircuts, and everything. And had no education. Wanted to go to university. I didn't have any GCSEs, so it was a very, very, very difficult. It was very, very difficult times for me. Yeah,
there are even symbols and things that we take for granted that we just accept in our life that somebody from a different group wouldn't necessarily understand. And I always remember the first ex-Hasidic Jewish person I interviewed, Emily Green, and she said that she went for a job interview and she asked afterwards, after a few job interviews, why didn't I get it? And they said, because you're wearing jeans, you're not dressed, you didn't dress well.
Right,
and she was like, what? There's no inherent value to jeans over suit trousers, but we feel like there is.
Yeah, every culture has their own norms, and Hasidic culture also has its own norms, which are not necessarily kind of logical or rational. It's just the way we present and subtly signal to each other in the world, and these are things. There's no handbook that tells you how to do it, and you can't figure it out logically. You just have to be in the society and learn it, and you often learn it by making mistakes.
It's something we can't get our heads around. And one of the things I've noticed from having interviewed a lot of people who have left high control groups, a lot of them turn super woke, for lack of a better word. Why do you think that is?
I wonder if that trend still continues. I think that trend may have been the case, maybe around 2015 time, because woke was kind of the new kind of the secular liberal ideology that it was almost assumed if you're atheist, you're going to be woke. I wonder if it's still true today. I certainly know many non-woke or even anti-woke kind of ex-religious members. But I also think, looking back at my past, there's the desire to belong and signal that you're belonging to the group that has kind of thrown off the yoke of conservative tradition, of the old values. You're a new made man, you're figuring it out from scratch. And woke in some ways presents itself as the antithesis of those traditional patriarchal religious values. Although, and there's been lots of writing about it recently, we now know that woke actually encompasses many aspects of high control religions, many black and white thinking, moralistic thinking, in-group, out-group. So in some ways, it's not really so much leaving religion as exchanging it for a different one. It takes time. Again, looking back on my experience, it takes time to rebuild an identity. When you shed a very all-encompassing ideology and you need to rebuild and find yourself kind of a replacement worldview, it takes time. And you do go from, you need to have the space to experiment and go from one ideology to the other and taste little bits until you find yourself either firmly in one or just snack a little bit for more, like I've done.
Is what you're saying? I suppose in many of these high control groups, there's a touch of homophobia. And when people leave, they go, okay, I want to do the opposite to what my group did. And I'm
exactly,
LGBT.
Or racism or all these kinds of things that wokeness is seen the opposite as. You want to shed them.
Why didn't you go down that path? Or were you tempted? Wokeness?
No, it never tempted me. I think I was quite motivated by rationality and science, and ideologies by their very nature are quite simplistic in terms of the worldview and like to skirt over or ignore some inconvenient truths, like human differences and sex differences and so on. And so it never tempted me. I did have a period of, identifying as quite ultra liberal. I went on gay pride marches and, which it was also just my social age and my social group. But no,
I would go along maybe to a gay pride. I don't think that's so bad. It's just some aspects of gay pride have become ridiculous, but there's still that, there's still that nice meaning part of it, I think.
Sure. I think these things evolve with the years. Yeah. But yeah, there's also just social belonging and just going along with what your group says.
Yeah. I think so.